I had to go see the doctor yesterday. I had to get an examination on a follow up on some physical therapy and stuff like that. And the doctor is a new doctor for me. I won't bore you with the details, but I went to this guy, and I was sorry I did. I'm not going to say he's a bad doctor because he didn't really do any doctoring. You know, we discussed a couple issues, and he never examined me. You know, never took my blood pressure, no tongue depressor down the throat, nothing like that. Just examined the issue that I went in there for. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's never happened to me before. I mean, he was an older guy, so maybe that's the way they did it back in the 30s. I don't know. The thing that made me nervous the most and really upset me, really, was we were discussing about a type of treatment. Again, I won't bore you with the details. And his opinion was it was necessary. My opinion was that it was too expensive to consider. And he says, well, what do you care how much it costs? I go, what do you mean? How much do I got to pay for it? He says, well, you should have done this by now. And I said, well, I wasn't going to spend the money. I really can't afford that kind of a treatment right now. And his attitude was, you just go into an emergency room and say you got heart problems. You're feeling chest pains, and they got to wait on you. And then they'll find the other thing that's going on, and they'll treat it, and they'll let you go when you're stabilized. And I said to him, what? I'm old school. I think if you can't afford something, you don't get the treatment. And he's like, well, that's the American way now. And I don't know what kind of statement he was making, but he's not from this country. Okay, so let me preface that. I'm not going to get into a racist thing. I'm saying he's not from this country, so his attitude about American healthcare was pretty poor. He says, well, in our country, we just take care of it. You don't have to go through all this rigmarole of lying in an emergency room. And I felt like saying to him, well, yeah, maybe in your country you still piss in a ditch too, but I don't think it's a good idea to do it here in the United States. So, but I suppose that would have been a racial comment, huh? I let it go. Besides, this is what I was talking about a couple weeks ago when I said that one of the things that bothers me the most is that I have to entrust my health care to inferior minds. You got people who, bear with me a second. Not every doctor is super intelligent. You don't have to be particularly intelligent to be a doctor. I know it's going to come as a shock to most people, but doctor is just like any other job. It's a matter of experience and training and knowledge. Now, you can't be, ordinary or below average intelligence to do your job. It requires a modicum of sophistication to do it. But nevertheless, it's a job like anything else. You can be trained for it. I dare say most people can be trained how to be a doctor if they wanted to put the time, effort, and energy and money into it. And that's not taking anything away from the profession. It's just that's the way it is. Now, there are some professions that are even more difficult than a doctor. In other words, specialties involving neurosurgery or something like that. I think that does require a little more sophistication. But it doesn't necessarily require a genius IQ to be a doctor. So when I have to entrust these people to make decisions about my life, it worries me because they're basing their decisions upon whatever they learned in whatever school they learned, tempered by their own, experience. But not everybody remembers everything from college or from medical school. They're not perfect. That worries me. That's why I question it. What annoys my doctors most, especially this new doctor, is that I question everything. When he says, well, I want you to take this medication. For instance, he asked me, what are you allergic to? So I said, well, I'm allergic to penicillin. A lot of people, allergic to penicillin. I'm allergic. He says, okay. I said, also, I have a problem with certain types of blood pressure meds, antidepressants. What I get is an inverse reaction. He says, I don't want to hear about that. I just want to hear, I asked you what your allergies were, which I thought was a surly answer to I was trying to explain to him, hey, listen, jackass, if you prescribe this stuff for me, it's not going to work. You're my doctor now. I expect you to listen when I say. I think a good part of being doctor is listening to what your patient says. He just writes it down. You know, he says, "Well, I'm inheriting this from another doctor in the practice or whatever." He says, "Well, what was your last blood pressure reading?" I said, "Well, I don't know what my last blood pressure is. Why don't you just take it now?" He goes, "I didn't ask you what your current blood pressure is. I asked you what it was last time you had it done." It's just, I don't think I'm going to go back. I'll have to find a new practice to take my business. And because that's what it is. When you go to a doctor, you're taking your business elsewhere. It's not, people get attached to their doctor. I remember when I was a kid, the family doctor, not for my parents, but for the extended family, my cousins and grandmother and all that, were going to a guy named, I better not mention his name, Dr. Simpson. That's not his real name. That's just a name I came up with. So Dr. Simpson was probably one of the worst doctors ever. He'd always prescribe medications or give the family treatments that would almost kill them every time. It's like, well, we got this. What happened? Oh, grandma, she took this medication or got this treatment and she's now worse off. Well, who did she go to? Dr. Simpson. Well, why do you guys keep going back? And it's like 3 or 4 times, and then it happened again. And you know what the family told my mom? Well, Doc Simpson is our family doctor. It's like people don't understand. You can go to whatever doctor you want. At least you can before Obamacare. And doctors are on commission too, in a sense. I expect some service from my physician. When I tell him something, I don't want an argument. When I have a question, I don't want a surly answer. It's a business. It's a business transaction as much as it is a medical decision. And I feel uncomfortable going to a doctor that doesn't listen to me. So I probably won't be going back. But it set me on fire that, he suggested that I go to an emergency room and get essentially, care on the cuff, because he says, well, I said, well, I can't pay for it. Well, what do you care? They'll just bill you and you don't have to pay it. That was his attitude. It was just a devil may care, let somebody else fall on the hook for a treatment that may or may not be necessary that's very expensive. I thought that was inappropriate. It's probably against the law too. He said to me, he says, well, if you go to the emergency room, don't tell him I told you to do that. It's great. This is a guy who's unethical too, and I'm going to let him touch me? No, not in your life. So I was reading